Thank you. Thanks, Alison. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's move on to 47 Oriel Road.
Okay, assuming we're live and that is working. 47 Oriel Road, the change of use of a C3 dwelling house to a mixed use C3, C4. Members, I first please accept an apology to the extensive SMAT. Unfortunately, the report is not one of the better ones we brought through you and therefore does contain a number of transcription errors that we will need to correct, so I'll pick those up as we go. Can I just check that the live feed is on? Okay. Well, my team talking to us via by chat suggests it might not be. So that may just be a delay. Good, lovely, thank you. So a relatively straightforward application in truth in terms of the standard assessment. Apologies that we undertaken. So we're around 4% of HMOs in the area. Get that to work. There we go. So that's the area, that's the site. Around 4%, so 3 HMOs are in the area, and all rooms over 10 metres, and that's with the 29 square metres communal space, well in excess of the 22.5. However, say there is a number of SMAT corrections and corrections to the SMAT corrections I must provide for you with my apologies. As highlighted there, we have 14 letters of objection as are detailed in the report, but that's been incorrectly reported at paragraph 1.1 in accordance with the SMAT. There was a amended plan, which is the plan referenced in the description, so therefore both the plan and the table on page 110, so this is below paragraph 810, are incorrect, and with apologies, the same incorrect table has been recreated in the SMAT. The fundamental difference, it's only really one of note, is that bedroom 5 is 11.57 metres, not 14.9. So to show you that is the incorrect plan, and that is the correct plan. So I'll challenge you to see the difference. It is just that rear bedroom in the middle, so third image along that rear bedroom there was incorrectly drawn and was reorientated through an amended drawing. As I say, it is 11.5 metres, so still well over 10, but not, as is reported there, 14.9 when the agent corrected those plans, and the case officer has been unable to pick that up correctly. So apologies for that, and unfortunately our SMAT hasn't helped us there. That needs to change to 11.9. And then, of course, the required standard should correctly be described as 22.5, not 34. You'll see the correct plan has been provided within the SMAT at page 9, so you can see the 11.57 I refer to, and also the Eagle Eye would have noted that the highways comments are incorrect. They are from a previous apologies, a previous comment, hence the reference to Queen's Road, and up-to-date highways comments have been provided in the SMAT there as well. As I say, members, apologies for those errors. Notwithstanding the errors from the case officer, the application itself is relatively straightforward and fully compliant with policy, and is therefore recommended for permission. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got a deputation, I think. Mr. Hill is... Oh, are you? Yeah, no, I know you said earlier, but you weren't on the list. But yeah, are you? Yeah, of course.
I just wanted to pick up a drafting error, that's all. It was only a drafting.
Oh, okay. Sorry, 1 second. What did you do?
On page 110, does this little asterisk bit have to be taken out of the report? Excluding part of bedroom 6 that was deemed to be unusable. I don't...
No, that remains. That's obviously referring to the fact that bedroom 6 has a chamfered roof, so as with all measurements, when we are having a sloping roof, we don't include those below the 1.5 metres, so that remains
exactly the same.
There's no asterisk
it refers to, that's what I...
Yes, that is the purpose of that referral, and yes, and to confirm bedroom 6 is correctly measured at 10 metres with the appropriate
There's
ceiling
no
heights above.
asterisk above, so.
Yes, thank you.
Judith, if I could ask you to switch your microphone off. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I always feel like I've already spoken about this one because it was mentioned in the last deputation. Obviously, the change is made. It shows that the communal room is big enough, or is up to our standard, let's say. I personally don't think it's big enough, but you know, each to their own. I do hope the snug stays a snug. You know, once again, this is kind of going back to the previous conversation of, you know, I do not like disingenuous applications, and I think that was mentioned earlier about the honesty with residents and councillors and making sure that, you know, that could, I don't want to give any ideas, but I don't think I really need to, but I could well see that being changed into another, and I just kind of feel like, you know, why have honesty, but at the same time, look, it's a 6-bedroom HMO, which in comparison to the 7 and the 8, which is even more pressure on the area. When I actually saw something about the parking, I thought that was a nice change. I kind of feel like more needs to be said about the parking, even though it always seems to be a taboo whenever it's mentioned. But in all honesty, these roads are prolific, and their surrounding areas are very prolific as well. In Nelson of parking, it's very, very hard, and there's a lot of pressure by adding more people, you know, as they keep saying, oh, it's only 1 extra person or 2 extra people, but, you know, do that times how many HMOs we have in the area, that soon becomes more than 1, doesn't it? That suddenly becomes about, you know, 10 or 20. And then, of course, unless everyone in these HMOs are single, they're going to have partners also going to come round, and that brings more cars. But it seems to be that parking's never an issue, and it's never discussed. One thing that hasn't been discussed, and I also request Ian could also look more into and work with, is with the police. I'm sure many of you know Henry Thorpe, which has given many deputations, especially for his own road, and he talks about the crime in ASB in the area, and it has been related and tied to HMOs previously. Obviously, I can't speak for the ones, obviously, now of people running it, but there has been a tie, and there are police reports, and I'd really urge Ian to reach out and get those reports. I think it's really useful because I do feel that's a material change, and it kind of always gets ignored, and actually I never actually get a reply when it's mentioned. I do believe also there is a report out there, but I unfortunately can't get access to it in relation to this. 2 of the rooms are on the kind of 10 metre square border, which will then obviously push it down to 22.5. I haven't really got much more to say other than I just think it's a real shame. It's, once again, it's another HMO in the same area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I mean, crime is not a material planning consideration.
So crime certainly can be. All the evidence that's available to the council is that there is no material impact of crime, because obviously crime is not committed by properties, committed by residents, whether they are homeowners, HMO dwellers or private rented sector issues. Clearly, it is recognised that HMOs have a higher risk of impacts on amenity. That would include crime and antisocial behaviour. That's why you have a restriction on them. If there was no such impact, you wouldn't have the 10% rule, I would suggest, or you'd have certainly much less justification to do so. So that has been fully accounted for both in policy setting, but then trying to apply that to a live application that's fully compliant with policy would be clearly unreasonable.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hill.
Hello. Once again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make a deputation. Again, this property has had its plans approved by building control. I'd like to thank the planning officer for the report on this one. I think there's quite a lot, like the reports seem to be getting more and more comprehensive, and an awful lot of the points are probably being addressed in a lot more detail, which I think is important. I take note of the comment about the disingenuous element of doing a 6-bedroom application. I think from our perspective, previously, the guidance that we had from the architecture firms that we worked with was that ultimately it would be quicker to do a C4 application. However, I have spoken to Ian and Simon previously about that, who've sort of given me more of the details of the current status. I think the problem is because these take so long to go through applications, then ultimately things can have changed in terms of the pipeline. I know the council's got more planning officers now, and the last application was with a new planning officer. So I hear your comments. It's not a case of us trying to mislead anybody. It's a case of us trying to work within the guidance that is there. And ultimately, a lot of these properties are done with bridging finance, which is very expensive. Yes, that's a developer's problem, but ultimately, if it's not profitable to do these, then or any development, then ultimately development in the city stops. And this is a city that needs significant development, so it is a really fine line. But ultimately, yeah, I take on board the comments. We are trying to make sure that the applications moving forwards are done straight from C3. There obviously, I'm sure, will be some in the coming months that are still C3 to C4 rather than C4 to sui generis, because we can't change them once they're there because of the consultation periods and that side of things, but I do take on board the comments. So, this property is a huge property. Yes, it's in an area where there is some objection to HMOs. However, it's also in an area where the houses are very big houses and it's super desirable for HMO tenants. Every single house that we've had in Shadwell, Wadham, Oriel, Ophir, North End Avenue, London Avenue, that area, they are some of the most popular properties from a tenant's perspective because the size of the rooms, the layout of the rooms is brilliant, and the location is unbelievable. If you look at the employment for a lot of these people, an awful lot of it is to the north of the island at Lakeside, or the old IBM buildings and that side of things, a lot of the public sector buildings, so actually, and as well as the hospital, and therefore location wise this is an idyllic location for an awful lot of the tenants, which is why there's such a high demand for the rooms. Again, there is a 10% maximum in place for a reason. We haven't gone above that with any of our applications, and I note that this one is significantly below that. So moving back to the property, yes, there will be bike storage. All of the rooms are over the minimum standards as per the planning officer's recommendation. All of the relevant policies, including PCS 19, PCS 20, and the Portsmouth plan, have all been complied with. With regards to parking, I note all of the comments. Ultimately, same applies as every other application so far. One point I would make is that it is hard to get the data. I'm happy to say it is really difficult to get the data. The data I've seen suggests that only 7% of HMO tenants have cars. We can argue about whether that's correct or not, but ultimately the data that we've been able to find suggests that only 7% of the tenants have cars, and obviously the council's own guidance suggests that there isn't a material consideration for that. We have changed all of the waste pipe work within this property to make sure that there's as minimal impact as possible on neighbouring properties. Arguably, actually, we've significantly improved the drainage within the grounds of this property by upgrading all of it, and therefore having a 6-bed HMO is significantly less likely to have any issues than you would have been previously with a family house, especially when you take into consideration the discussion about the fact that a large family house such as this could have adult children, etc., etc. All of the refuse and recycle bins will be upgraded to the larger 360-litre ones. In terms of all of the works, they're carried out under permitted development, so there's a rear dormer and a rear extension, all of which were done under permitted development and are all formed now. We've got party wall agreements in place with the neighbours as well. I think as far as in terms of the rooms, all of the rooms are completely compliant. They're all really good shapes and sizes, great layouts, and the communal area is one of the bigger ones. 29 square metres is a really good sized communal room for a house with 10 metre square bedrooms. Thank you very much, and I hope you look favourably on the application.
Thank you. And welcome news that we'll see fewer Trojan applications moving forward. Members, questions? Councillor Sanders.
I'm going to see if I can do less than 5 minutes 29, I think, on that one.
That would be helpful.
Just a few things. So thank you, Ian, for your honesty about the report. That's incredibly helpful, and I think improves the report no end. Just a few points. In the SMAT, you say that there's a correction to the room size table paragraph because the ground floor WC and living room have been removed from the list as they're not on the floor plan. Does that mean they're still there?
So the ground floor WC was never there. That's an error. Obviously, there is this ground floor snug living room. That is on the floor. It's not a living room. It's just the plans say snug. That is the commentary we've had earlier around a future room. That was correctly measured. That's the 13 square metre space. The drawing, the number error, the only one that's actually there erroneously in terms of measurement is bedroom 5, which says is down as 14.9. That wasn't incorrect. It was just using the wrong plan. The correct plan is 11.57.
No, that's that's really helpful, Ian. Just when we're assessing amenity, that means that there is going to be no toilet on the ground floor. Is that correct?
Yes, there is no separate WC on the ground floor. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. My only other point is around paragraph 3.5, and I think it just relates to a little bit of consistency with the previous application. You talk about the floor-to-ceiling heights of 2.3 metres, which is in line with the new standards that exist and how they're still there. In the previous application for Henderson Road, when it was the private sector housing team, but was outlines a public sector housing team in the previous report, mentioned that as important because they didn't know how tall the room was. The response from the team was that that was not a material planning consideration. Is it still not a material planning consideration in this one?
The private sector housing standards are their standards. They do have some variation to the adopted SPD. An adopted SPD is obviously a very weighty material consideration. Other corporate policy, is it not a material consideration? One could argue that it has some materiality. I would be loath to supersede your adopted, as the planning committee, your adopted guidance in preference of guidance that's been adopted elsewhere in the council. Happily confirm, of course, private sector housing and planning are discussing the alignment of those standards in due course. I've got a meeting on Friday, in fact, to have another round of conversations around that. So I wouldn't want to say that they were totally immaterial, but certainly to try and withhold permission for a planning permission on a housing standard where it does meet the planning standard, I think would be very unlikely to be successful on appeal.
That sounds like the answer to my question is yes, which is that the two are consistent.
There are inconsistencies, as I say, and we're looking at how to align those.
That's okay. Chris, thank you very much.
A gentle nudge to remind members to turn the microphones off when they're not speaking. Otherwise, you're hogging the cameras. Members, questions, comments? I shall move the officer's recommendation. Councillor Candlish?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Members, are there any other comments on this application? Okay, the motion in front of us is to move the officer's recommendation. Those in favour, please indicate.
That was a unanimous grant of planning permission.
Thank you, Kieran. Okay, we move on to Fratton Road.
Chairman, thank you. Apologies for the slight delay. Just organise my papers. Right. Item number 4, 35 to 37 Fratton Road. Part change of use and conversion to mixed-use development comprising commercial business, Class E, storage, Class B8, and sui generis units at ground floor. Construction of a 2-storey extension with mansard roof to the front of the site and a 2-storey extension to the rear in order to create 8 flats. Also changes to the fenestration and associated works to the rear to provide refuse, cycle and storage facilities accessed from Vivash Road. We have deputations to follow from objectors and from the architect. Also to note in the SMAT, clarification of the position Portsmouth is in regarding the 5-year housing land supply, which is a material consideration of considerable weight. I would draw your attention to that. Thank you. This is for Planning Committee on the request of Councillor Corkery. This site just shows the site in its wider context, located just over 1 kilometre as the bird flies east of the Guildhall, or Guildhall Square, marked by this red star, close to Fratton Station, and the site is also within the Fratton District Centre and a high density area as set out in the Portsmouth local plan. The site itself extends to 0.12 of a hectare and is currently used by a large single-storey building, last used as a social club, which I believe closed in about 2018. The proposal as set out in the committee report is for the change of use of ground floor level, as I said, to Class C uses, some 379 square metres, and storage uses, 323 square metres, and sui generis use of 101 square metres. This slide here shows the existing street scene along Fratton Road and the rear of the site fronting onto, or backing onto Vivash Road. In terms of the proposed development, a 2-storey extension with a mansard roof is proposed along Fratton Road and a 2-storey extension at the rear. The Fratton Road frontage shows the commercial units at ground floor level, which, given the location within the Fratton District Centre, would improve the vitality and viability of the centre with the residential accommodation above. As clearly set out in the officer's report, and as you can see from the plans, the proposed development does indeed does maximise the use of land available within the site for development. These plans show the flats at first floor level. Having regard to the amount of the quantum of development proposed on the site, I would draw your attention to paragraph 125 in the NPPF, which states that where there is an existing or anticipated shortage of land for meeting identified housing needs, and that's set out in the statement on the 5-year housing land supply, it is important that planning policies and decisions avoid homes being built at low densities and ensure that developments make optimal use of the potential of each site. It goes on to state at subparagraph C that local planning authorities should refuse applications which they consider fail to make efficient use of land. In this context, when considering applications to housing, authorities should take a flexible approach in applying policies or guidance relating to daylight and sunlight where they would otherwise inhibit making efficient use of land, as long as the resulting scheme would provide acceptable living standards. The building is to be finished in a palette of materials comprising a red-brown brick and with a zinc roof. Access to the flats will be from Fratton Road, and the existing access off Vivash Road is retained. The material considerations are set out in the report, and the officer recommendation is to grant planning permission. Just to run through these slides, these show in a bit more detail the layout of the flats on the first floor. The highlighted yellow windows are obscurely glazed, as shown there and there. All the flats meet or exceed the nationally described space standards. This is a plan showing the internal courtyard or roof terrace garden to be finished with a tiled finish and with landscaping around the edges. This is a CGI of the proposed Fratton Road frontage, showing the mansard roof with a standing seam zinc roof. And here are some CGI perspectives of the development as provided by the architect and included in the application. And further here, and some further photographs to give you the idea, some idea of the context of the site in the local area, and photographs taken by the case officer within the site. The photograph here, top right, is approximately. I'm advised by the case officer, as I haven't had the chance to visit the site myself, but I'm advised that that is approximately the location of the proposed roof terrace. And further photographs taken from within the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. Okay, so deputations, we have some representatives of the South Sea Self-Help Housing Cooperative. Over to you. Yeah, I think you're going to split the time available between you. Okay, over to you.
Hello, my name's Caroline Trimnell. I'm a member of South Sea Self-Help Housing Cooperative. The development would back directly on to our rear gardens. I mean, a washing line distance from my kitchen and from those of everybody living there. We also have flats, and that would impact them. We have vulnerable people. We're very worried about the impact on our vulnerable people, people with asthma, people with mental health problems. We use the area directly next to the development as a communal space. We're very community-minded, and that gives people an opportunity to mix, to socialise. People don't get lonely in our community because we don't allow it. That social space is there for that particular reason. I've been personally living in Luckmouth Street for 23 years. Colt's been there a lot longer. I remember the Trades Club. It was noisy every couple of nights, but what it didn't do is increase the volume of traffic and cause parking problems. Since the building's been derelict, there's been a huge increase in the population of that area with businesses and residences. We have problems with parking already, problems with volume of traffic already, and we think this is going to make a bad situation worse. In terms of the private development for housing, personally, as an organisation, we don't believe that the way of solving the housing crisis in this city is to allow personal developers to benefit from encroaching on already densely populated spaces and destroying communities, basically, within those spaces. There was a plan once to create this building into a mosque and an education centre. We would have favoured that plan because it's always been a community hub. It's in an ideal situation for a mosque and an educational centre. And the building plan looked beautiful, actually. And it would, most importantly, it would have been done piecemeal, very, very slowly. So the impact upon us of the actual building project would have been much more reduced than this one's likely to be. We don't know how much communication there will be between the developer and ourselves as a housing organisation, if disruption can be minimised or if there are problems arising with things going on site. We don't know if we're going to be given any contact details. We're sad that the mosque didn't go ahead. We were already in contact with the Anatolian Society that were building the mosque. And as far as we knew, that's what was happening until this letter came through our door. How long will we have to deal with this disruption and the impact? And we're worried about the long-term effect on our communal garden, which is part of the green corridor and which we've carefully cultivated to be a natural space of great value with trees, plants, insects, bats, birds, you name it, we've cultivated in our garden. And we're really worried that this is going to impact our garden in the long term. Over to my colleague Tracy. who would like to talk on that, if that's okay. Oh, just before I stop, there's one thing I did notice on the plans. When you showed the photograph into the car park, I don't know if it's clear to people that that car park is ours. That's how close it is. That car park is our car park for our flats and houses. It's not part of the site, it's ours. That's how close it is. It's literally at the bottom of our garden. It's the last one you showed after that. Yeah, see that car park there? That's our car park. That building that they're going to develop, that's our back wall. Literally to all our houses. That is our back wall.
If I could ask you to switch your microphone on, off, and that's it. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name's Tracy and I'm also part of Southsea Self-Help Housing Cooperative. So I'm just going to just express some more concerns regarding the impact or potential impact of the development. So we have concerns about the impact on our communal garden area, which has been designated a green corridor because of its importance for wildlife. It's a very important green space amongst a very built-up area. And it's an important space for the housing cooperative members. Everyone uses it as a social and friendship space, and we are worried we will not be able to use it due to the noise, dust, debris that might be sort of coming over, as it's very close to the site, as has been explained. So we're very concerned about the impact on our trees in the garden, which are in our garden, but obviously the roots will go into the sort of site. And there's also two which I was told aren't within the boundary site, but they're very close to it, that are over the other side. So we're concerned about the effect of the building works on the tree roots. And I wanted to highlight the Portsmouth greening strategy, which is all about protecting and highlighting biodiversity, which includes trees, which are very important to this and are included in the strategy. So there's just like concerns about the impacts of the development on the sort of natural environment and the trees. So concerned about the impact on the wildlife, and particularly bats. So I wanted to sort of raise this because they're a protected species and there'll be an increase in artificial lighting, and this is known to affect bats and other wildlife. We have seen bats in the garden this year, and so we wanted to ensure that these are protected. And just to say, the Green Corridor has taken many years to create and become the haven for wildlife that it is. If it was to go ahead, I just wanted to raise some issues about, how would our Green Corridor and communal garden be protected from dust and debris, etc. How would the residents be protected from noise levels and pollution and dust, because it is extremely close. And there was a lot in the documents about how the development could provide opportunities for increasing and enhancing biodiversity to benefit wildlife. The bat scoping report talked about the developer being encouraged to consider bat roosting opportunities into the building fabric and recommends 2 native trees are planted as part of the landscaping. And we would suggest that other native plants could be planted too. Also, the report talks about artificial lighting and its effects and says, as the site may be used for foraging and commuting bats, it is important that the potential for disturbance from artificial lights is considered. Development is likely to require an ecologically sensitive lighting scheme with guidelines produced by the Bat Conservation Trust. So just talking about the concerns around wildlife and the nature that's there. But I have other concerns, obviously, around increasing cars and the problem of there already being a lack of parking in the area, and really concerned about the impact of the building works on residents, including the sort of noise levels, dust, debris and the pollution. And I just want to say it's important to consider the impact on the residents living so closely to the proposed development and on the wildlife and the green space that is there. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, and I appreciate you've had to wait longer than you thought you might to be able to speak with us. If I could ask you to take your microphone off, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to hear from the agent now. So, Mr. Holman, over to you, 6 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Even though the applicant is aware that there's a recommendation for approval, we've been requested to represent them today, which shows the importance of this planning application. The application, as described by the planning officer, is for the change of use and conversion of the existing building with the construction of two-storey extension to provide 8 apartments and commercial units. The applicant submitted a pre-application in 2018 and subsequently a full application for a 5-storey building creating student accommodation, which was withdrawn. This followed in 2019 by a further student residence application, reducing the height of the development, but was again withdrawn. In 2022, we submitted a further pre-application, which formed the basis of the application you see before you. So the client has spent considerable time in working with the LPA to reach a scheme which can be supported, and the last several months we've been consulting and adhering to all the comprehensive requests by the planning officer to provide support for the application. In the time the client has purchased the site, and as of today, Portsmouth City Council have purchased the Bridge Centre just a short distance from the site as part of a regeneration of the city's high streets in this particular location, which we hope will lend support to this application as the proposal goes a long way to deliver the core principles in the council, providing improvements to the high street as well as investing in new homes and employment opportunities. For the past few months, we have worked closely with the planning officer and provided requested additional CGIs of the aesthetic of Fratton Road, as well as additional detail relating to the roof terrace, amendments to the internal flat layouts and window orientation, and design to ensure there are no concerns or impact on existing residents. Furthermore, the proposal has been vacant for some years and comprising a brownfield site we hope can be supported as designated under policy PCS8, providing commercial along the ground floor frontage and residential on upper floors, which is stated to be encouraged under this policy. The proposal also supports the Council's plans for additional homes under the policy PCS10 and the design with regard to materials and taking into account the local context as stated in the officer's report adheres to policy PCS23. The existing commercial unit, which we believe previously was a snooker club, required ongoing maintenance and had no long-term future, having been vacant for 5 years. In this time, the client has health and safety concerns due to the dilapidated condition, and having been left vacant, the application was synced to bring a core central building in Fratton back into use. The proposals will reuse the rear of the site that is located in a sustainable location and thus accords with policy and result in creation of much needed residential dwellings, therefore hoping to deliver the housing requirement for the council whilst being in accordance with local and national policy. We believe we've provided a robust case in the circumstances. We consider that your planning officer's report and recommendation are comprehensively presented and, as stated by the LPA in their report, it is considered that the proposal represents a positive addition to the area, does not unduly impact on the amenities of the neighbouring properties, would afford future occupants a good standard of living and would represent an efficient use of brownfield site, and trust that this would be permitted, noting the conditions attached should a permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. Okay, members, questions?
Thank you for the further details about the fenestration particularly. I'm worried about the flats themselves being dark and not having access. Could we see that plan again? You went through it very fast. Please.
Apologies, Councillor, yes, I did. So I believe...
And in this case, I'm asking questions about the internal living environment. I've got a second question about landscaping, if I might. So can we just have a look at those once you've settled on it?
That's the overall scheme, and then moving forward into the detail, this is...
So does that cover the whole scheme? That those two plans cover the whole scheme, do they?
No, this is flats number 1 and 2 in more detail.
Yes.
And then moving forward, this is flats 3, 4 and 5.
And the yellow marking is obscure glass?
Obscure glazing, yeah.
Yes. So can you just talk us through flats to tell us what they will be able to see of the natural world? So take apartment number 5.
So this window here. Sorry.
There's obscure glazing to the laundry
Hang on.
room there, but everybody's going to be sharing
Right,
that.
there we are, yes. So there we go. That's, yeah, obscure glazing to the
But that's a communal room.
laundry room. This is a living room, kitchen.
And there is a window there that people will be able to go to look straight over into.
There is, so this, just to give you an idea of separation, so I think we were looking at this flat here.
Yes.
There is 14 metres separation to the rear of the properties along this road to the south.
Yes. And one of the windows will be not obscure, and it'll be, and the other two will be.
Sorry to interrupt. So, sorry, I thought we were looking at flat 5.
We are.
Isn't that the long, narrow one?
I beg your pardon, Councillor, yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
Please stop moving that.
Sorry. Unfortunately, the plans, let me turn the pointer off as that is annoying.
I think it's easier to see it on that other plan, and we have to just be consistent about numbering and orientation. So here we're looking at the narrow flat, which is apartment number 5. We've got obscure glazing on the communal laundry. We've got obscure glazing on the stair. Is that a staircase there? And we've got a window opening out over the dining table, which will look over people's back gardens, but at a 90-degree angle. That seems. And then, is there a window from the bathroom?
The bathroom is shown to be internal. With
Internal
no
bathroom, even though there is a wall, a place there that could provide external light.
Apologies, there may be some confusion on this drawing. Those two insets, one is a accessible terrace and the
Yes.
other is a light well. So the bathroom is served by a window facing into that light well,
Yes.
as is the hallway, as is then the bedroom. So that's they're on all three sides of it. It's open
Okay.
to the rear. So where it's been marked as obscurely glazed, that's actually not
I was
glass.
just
There is
moving
a-
along
yeah.
that way. Yes.
Yeah,
I
so
see
there
it
is
says light well.
a standard window, if you will, into the dining room. Then there's the exterior terrace, which is that large area with the somewhat confused doors all around it that opens up. And that obviously has a windows on, a door-window combination on the side facing the dining room table and facing the corridor, and a window above that sofa you can see there in the living room. And then move down, there's another light well inset with 3 windows around it into the bathroom, the hallway and the bedroom. That is the main window for the bedroom, which obviously will allow oblique views through the light well, but also has a light, roof light above it. You can see it there in the corner of the bed, and the obscure, that yellow, that isn't glazing on the edge there. There is one's a terrace, one's an inaccessible light well. There is some fencing shown on the elevations, a screen below visible height. So obviously people could utilise that as an external amenity area, a small one though it be, but one that's sort of a part in, part out space as it breaks into that kitchen dining space through what looks to be a complicated folding door arrangement.
So the sort of area with 4 doors coming onto it, surely that's the corridor within the flat between the bedroom and the living accommodation.
Yes, that hallway with the front door
Yes.
and the bathroom door, the bedroom door and the living space, that is served by a small window immediately opposite the front door, slightly offset into the light well, which is the rectangle below that.
And the front door is the one on the north side, is it?
I'm not sure that's north orientated, but yes, the one on the upper wall, yes,
Yeah.
into the main corridor. Yeah.
And the windows there's one, the obscure one up, which goes into the light. There's a light well. I understand the light well. And okay, I don't know what others think about that, but I think that's kind of fairly short of light from the outside world. Will they be able to walk out onto the terrace from there?
Yes, the terrace is shown as accessible, the light well is not.
No, I understand the light wells. Where is the access to terrace?
It's that somewhat complicated folding arrangement, so that whole corner of that square terrace appears to open out into to enable that whole terrace to be fully incorporated into the living space, or sealed off, obviously, as well. So that's quite an open and airy space, albeit chinked around through that space rather than being a traditional window arrangement. But that's obviously supplemented by the traditional window arrangement.
So there'll be kind of two sides of window. You can see the sky immediately outside.
There'll be two sides of bifold door
Yes.
that will be able to be folded away, and then you'll be able to see the full sky component and etc. from that direction.
So that goes some way towards mitigating my concerns. Can we go to the next flat along? Move west, please. Apartment number 8.
The next flat along is apartment number 6.
Yes, and that has obscure glass to the right-hand side, and then there is there any window in that flat that would give sight of the sky or the environment around the flats?
Yes, the green line goes straight through it, and we're looking at apartment number 6, so not where the pointer's pointing. That's number 8. Thank you. Apartment number 6. Just below where the pointer now is, that is a standard window, so that looking out, so the one that's just around the corner provides additional light and ventilation opportunity, but is obscurely glazed, obviously to prevent intervisibility between apartment 5, I would anticipate.
And is that a window there along the wall from there into the bedroom?
Take one step further along to the bedroom. It's an unusual design. Again, it's been oddly cantilevered. I'm not sure that's truly necessary, but obviously the architects looked at that to minimise intervisibility between apartment 6 and apartment 8. So that's been tilted inwards, so you'll still get the full view, notwithstanding a couple of inches either side from the casement, but it is angled slightly to minimise intervisibility going sideways towards apartment 8 and indeed beyond to the adjacent residential property gardens.
Okay, now apartment number 8, there is a big obscure window in the kitchen living room area, and I take it there are 2 other windows to the north and to the south of that room shown on the map.
So for this one, that's an L-shaped window, wraps around the corner. The yellow bit, that's obscured in its lower proportions, and as it wraps around the corner, that is shown as a clear glass window, I understand from that drawing. And then you carry along the window next to the sofa, that's a high-level window.
High-level window. And to the north, on the north bit?
Sorry, that's the internal corridor, obviously.
Okay, so that's not a window there? No, can't be. Was that the television or something like that drawn there?
I'd imagine so. And apologies, the elevations do show that corner window is fully obscured all the way around. Not sure that's necessary, if I'm honest, because of the degree of separation, but that is what the elevations show.
Yeah, that seems a bit draconian. And the windows, the oblique windows, giving access into the 2 bedrooms there, giving one of them that one is obscure,
Again,
and the others are not, and the bathroom has no...
Cross-referencing those with the elevations, all 3 of those cantilevered windows are designed the same, with 2 panes, the lower pane being obscure and the upper pane not. Again, how necessary that is, considering they're both tilted away from it, direct facing across that roughly 14-metre gap Edward was describing earlier, but they are shown to be tilted, as you can see there, and with lower obscurely glazed pane and a larger than average, I'd say, upper clearly glazed pane, which obviously would allow both visibility for sky components at least, and obviously ventilation, because one would anticipate they are opening. And then you're quite right, the 2 bathrooms, the shower room en suite and the bathroom, which are on the far end there, both without external windows.
And they have mechanical ventilation of some sort?
Indeed.
No external windows? Okay. Shall we just, is it tedious? We ought to go to our partner number 7, and that's got an obscured glazed, it's got north-facing windows on that side. That's a one-bedroom apartment, quite small with a kitchen in it. That seems okay. And the next one along on the north. No, that one I'm reasonably satisfied with. And that has, though, the windows, 3 windows in the north facing.
And obscure glaze to the bathroom.
Sensible.
Yeah.
And one in the bedroom, okay. And there's one more flat up in the top corner, isn't there? Off the plan.
There is.
Number 2.
If you've got 1 and 2 above it, so there's 2 flats here, yeah. two stories, they all front onto the street with their windows.
With obscurely glazed windows to the bathrooms.
At the back, yeah.
Yeah, at the back.
Okay, on the face of it then, those are more straightforward. I mean, I'm a little bit worried about the fenestration and the obscure glass. Well, I'll wait to hear what the discussion is later on. Chair, may I ask a question also about landscaping? Where are the...
If I may, just to sort of to conclude that, I think it's been a really useful review. I hope members have enjoyed that. Certainly, this is a highly dense development. They've looked at every opportunity to get them in. So some of those, and I think they've gone too far in some cases. They don't necessarily need that. Obviously, residents that would otherwise would be overlooked at that 14-metre distance may well have a different personal opinion that obviously members will want to consider as well. This is why I would raise that point of paragraph 125 C that does highlight the fact that, you know, where you are trying to maximise the benefit of urban land, the thing to look at, the thing to draw your compromises on is internal lighting. That's why I would anticipate the architect has, rather than have a bit more light, which obviously by definition is likely to give a bit more outlook and overview of neighbours, they've gone with a large number of cantilevered windows and different layouts. So it is certainly one of the more challenging parts of the scheme. Overall, officers are satisfied you get a resultant internal amenity that is acceptable. It's not amazing, but is acceptable. And where you've crossed that line, so it is still an acceptable living environment, national guidance is very clear. You should be prioritising the delivery of additional homes and making best use of sustainably located land, which this clearly is. Add to that our tilted balance without our 5-year land supply, and that leads to the conclusion of officers to support the scheme, notwithstanding that some of these will be slightly unusual. Quirky, to be positive, slightly unusual in their layout and outlooks. But yeah, I think it's a useful set of commentary. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy with, I understand the context and I understand the policy guidance. Is it something that would be worth thinking about amending a condition and reserving the right to have some further discussions about that to see if we could increase the amount of direct daylight access? I mean, you've already sort of said that you think maybe we will need to obscure some of those panes, those glasses, but maybe not all of them. And I would like to be in a position to think about approving this, but also to have some leeway around getting light to people. Direct day access to light and air, especially with the climate changes, is very important for mental health.
Yes, we're satisfied that this layout, so you could do it, you can always do it differently. This layout is acceptable, and so it certainly, if anything, it's lent more towards supporting adjacent residents, which is certainly something to be applauded. Clearly, if there are improvements the applicant wishes to look at, future applications for non-material amendment or indeed minor material amendment can be made, rather than notionally reserving. That's not a legitimate condition, I would advise. So if it was unacceptable, we would have to reserve and tell them what we wanted to change. Overall, this is acceptable. You could do it differently. This is the way the applicant has chosen to do it, and our advice is it is acceptable. Clearly, if they wish to continue looking and evolving that, which is very common during constructions of difficult layout buildings, they will come back and reapply for amendments should they need to.
Is there any way we could take the initiative in a condition of welcoming that discussion? No.
No, we can make it informative that we would encourage them to
Okay.
exercise it, but that's fairly common sense. A condition actually has to require something that's necessary, and as I say, we're satisfied it's not necessary, albeit, as always, a different designer could look at it slightly differently and come up with a different solution to the same issue.
I think I could argue it was necessary in some cases, but I won't split hairs so much as that at this stage. Can I just ask a question about landscaping? There are apparently 2 trees proposed. Can we see where they're going to be? And can we also see any details that there might be on other forms of biodiversity around the scheme? I appreciate it's a very small site, but I think we do need to think about maximising planted areas, even in a small site like this, particularly in view of the time and trouble that South Sea Self-Help Housing have taken just next door. It'd be good to think of a butterfly from that area being able to find something to eat in this area. You have got a condition under this already, and that is reserved to we have got a condition about landscaping, and I wondered if that was strong enough to ensure that we're going to perhaps encourage a little bit more greenery. That would make a difference to outlook where it exists as well. So that's the second question about landscaping. And
the
I can
trees
see
that are
where
proposed,
it is on the roof,
yeah, so
roof terrace.
the only landscaped area is this external roof terrace, so it's an urban landscape space at first floor level. So there are, as you can see illustrated on here, in that 2 bits of landscaping. I mean, they technically can be trees. We are planting them at a first floor level on a terrace. The definition of tree includes quite small plants of tree species, so that is clearly the intent, and thus that's the intent we would take through to the landscaping scheme, which, as you say, is covered and is as strong as one can make a landscaping scheme. There are no other trees proposed elsewhere in the site. There are no opportunities to put trees elsewhere in the site. It very much fills its boundaries edge to edge. So this is the landscaping. Lots of planters and opportunities for proportionate planting at first floor level, which obviously can, and we will expect sensible planting within that, both for maintenance, appearance and ecological and biodiversity advantage.
Indeed, that's welcomed. And the related question to this is, can we ask for the trees that are just on the boundary and near the boundary with South Sea Self-Help Cooperative to be protected during this the development? And there is also a condition to refer to here, I wanted to take up through this question the concerns of the representative of South Sea Self-Help, who wants to make sure that the development does minimum damage to that important green space that they have created.
So our arboricultural officers looked at this quite carefully. Those trees are on adjacent land beyond walls that are existing, so there is no protection within the site that the applicant can do to those trees. They could go into the neighbour's site and put a Harris fence around a root protection area, but they have no right to enter that area, so that would just be preventing them utilising it. So there is no further protection that the applicant can do to the trees. They're not proposing to sink new foundation lines within the root protection area, or do any work other than if there may be a necessity to do some crown works if it is oversailing the boundary. That is their legal right. Of course, I don't believe that is the case in this case, however, but obviously, depending on how trees grow and how long it takes to deliver out the scheme. So there is no way or necessity to protect that space. They have no right of access to that space, and clearly if they did want to move on to that space, they'd have to agree through party arrangements onto that neighbours.
It's an amenity. The trees are sufficiently large to be an amenity to the whole of the area. They stick up out of there. Should we put them under a tree preservation order?
Well, should the council feel that those trees warrant a tree preservation, well, that's an entirely separate judgment to whether or not we're granting plan permission. This development has no impact on those trees, so there is no need to say we put tree protection conditions on schemes that have trees in their site to say, look, leave that tree alone, make sure you put Harris fencing around the root protection area, so on and so forth, because otherwise they could inadvertently or intentionally harm the trees. In this case, they can't get to those trees, they can't get to those root protection areas, so they can't harm those trees, nor can we require the neighbour to put in protection for those trees, which obviously would be unnecessary. That would just be limiting the enjoyment of that open space those neighbours already have.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris.
No, okay. Everybody must be heard, including Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chris. I have to say I'm going to ask some questions in the hope of guiding people, because then I'm going to be heading off as per my for my 1 o'clock meeting. Ian, are any of these homes affordable?
No, it's below the threshold to require affordable housing, and no to the question.
Okay, thank you for that. In 2.14, you talk about an application for a retail unit, which is awaiting decision. What is the status of that, Edward, assuming this gets permission? Is that then just have you had conversations with the person behind the retail unit at all? I mean, see, if you don't know, that's absolutely fine. That's right. It's just what we don't want is this. If this gets approved and then a retail unit turns up as well, that will be an interesting thing. The deputies talked a lot about a couple of things around noise and everything else and construction. So just to be clear for everyone, is the impact of the construction of a development a material planning consideration when deciding whether the development should go ahead, yes or no? This is a question to which I know the answer, but I want everyone else to.
Well, as always, there is no yes or no answers in planning. Everything takes to be material. In this case, the need to manage environmental impacts of construction has been recognised as relevant, thus material to this application, and a construction environmental management plan requirement has been added through condition 17. The fact that it will cause noise disturbance and so on and so forth to the neighbours is an inevitability. So that it won't, there will be an impact, and that is not a reason to withhold plan permission, but it is a reasonable ground to look to control and manage those environmental impacts, which is what the CEMP, the Construction Environmental Management Plan, would do.
That's very helpful, because one of my suggestions to colleagues would be to have a construction and environmental management plan, if that is in there already, particularly with regards to actually helping inform the local neighbours as well around it, because they're obviously worried that nobody's going to talk to them. That's fine. The second bit is once the scheme, assuming the scheme gets approved, once the scheme is in place, would it be prudent to have some sort of stakeholder engagement plan between the applicant and the people living in the Southern Co-op, and also some of the shops as well that are affected by the site? My suggestion would be yes, but I just wanted to know whether this committee could actually do that as a condition.
Two questions there. Would it be prudent? Yes. Is it within the power or relevance of this committee? Absolutely not. No, it would be entirely disproportionate to require unknown future occupiers to maintain a relationship with their neighbours. This is already a commercial site. They're changing the ground floor to a different form of commercial site, then putting some flats above it. There would be no policy justification and thus necessity. Absolutely encourage it. Of course I would. I would encourage all neighbours to engage positively and proactively, but it's not for the council to tell them how to undertake neighbourly relations between them.
And my final question, Chris, involves some of the stuff that Judith was talking about earlier, which is in 643 we talk a lot about the nature conservation aspects of the site, but we don't seem to mention the garden that our friends from the Southern Co-op and Tracy were talking about earlier and the impact on that. I'm assuming that's because the officers feel that there will be no impact.
As I say, obviously there will be temporary disturbance in the enjoyment of that space while construction work goes on next door, but there is no encroachment on that space or interference with that space, certainly from an ecological or environmental point of view. So yes, there is no impact in that sense.
Okay, those are my questions, Chris, and I will now have to leave. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you for being a standing deputy today. Councillor Vallely.
Sorry, actually, I was just wondering about the bats. Should we have a protection order put in place?
Bats are already protected by national legislation. We have imposed a condition, condition number 11, requiring that they do undertake the work that they say they're going to do in respect of the preservation of bat habitats in accordance with their bat scoping report.
But can I just ask, what about the report that the women were talking about the future of the bats and the artificial lighting?
That's the report I refer to. So they've done a full study and they've made recommendations, and Condition 11 requires that they carry out the scheme in accordance with that.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, really. The first one, I think Judith teased out quite well. Mine was around the frosting out of the windows, or the thing. I think that's been well spoken through, talked through. But specifically, you mentioned about the screening at the end, that there's going to be written. Somebody's going to write in later about that. Is it going to be frosted, or is it going to be fretwork? Or because I think that's important from both the residents looking out and the local people. It could affect the look of the building quite a lot as well, depending on the type of screening that you use.
This is the screening of the apartment 5 terrace and Lightwell in particular. I'm not sure we've got an image of it. It's a fairly, I don't wish to be unfair to the designer, utilitarian fence style screen in there. It's a quasi-commercial space. That's a reasonable design. Obviously, you know, a more architectural or artistic screen could be imposed on the edge of that terrace and Lightwell if there was a desire from the architect to do so. Again, I wouldn't say it was necessary. It is a fairly standard fence structure that is there, rather than a obscurely glazed sheet or a filgery or other complex piece of ironwork.
And the second point was around the rear access. It shows on the bottom. We didn't really go into that too much about the commercial properties on the ground floor. Can somebody talk me through those a little bit more, please?
I'm going to pass over to Edward, because you're quite right. It's quite a complicated rear access. Yeah. As he's found it for me, I'll step in. So Vivash wrote here, as you can see, that there is currently, I think we may have a photo, but there is number 8, which is an existing dwelling, which they're not changing. So that's the dwelling that's within the red line in addition to the 8 new apartments. You can see it there with the blue garage door next to it. That blue garage door takes you through to the rear entrance space courtyard, which is then internal, beyond the apartments we've just talked about. So it is quite complicated, apologies there. Into that courtyard space, you can see there with all the red lines scribbled all over it. Thank you, Edward, that's useful. You can see on the top of that image there, the top left is the retained dwelling. The top right, if you will, where those red lines are, that's the bin storage area. Then below that is a courtyard space, and as you can see, you then enter the building in a number of different places. Either there's a entrance on the top there, you can see what looks like an hourglass. That's double doors on the top there. That takes you down that communal walkway, communal passageway into the commercial spaces. And in the middle of the image, is the stairwell and bike storage for the 8 flats, which is accessed. Go back, left, down, yeah. That is the cycle storage for the residential units and the access this end to the residential units. There's a front access to the residential units from that end of the building as well. So there's, what is quite hard to see here is there is a small rear courtyard space in between that residential stair core and the bin store. That's open space which is accessed through the building through what is a large covered walkway with a ceiling height of 2.69 metres through those garage doors, those blue garage doors in the previous image.
Sorry, so on that figure 2, page 12, figure 2 proposed rear access, rear section, where are those 2 sets of commercial A use and commercial B use and then commercial C use? Well, can you just point me in direction? Is that directly rear or is it to the side? I'm struggling to see that.
A, B, C are the 3 large units on the ground floor. And there, so you can see on this image, and that's ABC there, isn't it? Yeah, they are accessed through that passageway that runs along the top of the site. That takes you through to the front of the site to access the commercial spaces there, and they have that access, that what looks like an hourglass, the double doors on the left, go left there, which access through into the rear courtyard.
Sorry, so that the front of the building, I see Fratton Road, the rear of the building, and it's got these like three glazed units. Where I can't see that, I can see the double doors. That doesn't correlate to, unless can you put me in the right on figure 2, proposed rear section at the bottom of page 12. Can you show me where that? Because I'm not seeing, and I'd like to know how you get. Just want to understand how you get to that, because it looks like that's commercial units and people are going to be rocking up to those, the way I'm looking at it from previous things I've looked at in the past.
Yeah, no, they're not. So unfortunately, that's partly a section and partly an elevation, so not particularly helpful drawing there.
Building then, is it?
So no, it's a
It's
section.
a cut through.
Yeah, it's a cut through of the building. So yeah, the front units you can see on Fratton Road, you can see 3 traditional shop front units which are probably better illustrated on figure 5 on the far right hand side as the upper image here. That's the 3 shop front units, and then you've got as you go back into the site 3 storage units which may or may not be associated with those retail 2 retail 1 takeaway unit on there. So yeah, that's I would in no way doubt the accuracy of that drawing, but unfortunately sections can get quite unhelpful, and I think that may well be one such example.
To be fair, it does say rear section, not elevation, doesn't it? So actually, when I'm looking at it, I was just trying to understand, it said rear, and I was thinking that was going to be commercial units that people might be going to from the rear.
Is anybody as confused as I am about that? Where's this cut through? Sorry, I didn't quite...
So that is a sectional drawing. Unfortunately, I don't have the plan that shows where that section is taken, but what we see there is a part of one of the apartments to the rear, cut through, if you will, and we see the commercial frontages on Fratton Road in combination with the first and second floor flats. That's the rear elevation of those first and second floor flats. But those entrance doors that appear to be, if you will, standard shop doors are right at the front of the building. So they're some, again, really depends. CAD throws up some interesting images sometimes. There aren't 3 shop fronts at the back. They are the ones on the front.
I'm glad you get it. Councillor.
I'm glad there's been some pre-work done, because I was completely confused, but I think I'm now only slightly confused. The 3 storage areas, are they directly associated with the 3 shops at the front, or are they envisaged as a standalone operation which will require other strange people getting to them? And I guess relatedly, even then, well, it looks a very... I hope they're selling shoes in those shops at the front rather than having to carry much stuff back and forth. But that is a function of the site design, and to an extent I think they're just using that middle section for what they can get in. Am I understanding what I'm seeing?
I believe so. Are there storage spaces, B8 storage spaces as described in paragraph 2.7, directly associated and tied to the commercial units? No, it would be possible to subdivide and use those by different occupiers, should the landowner want. Real world, I mean, certainly they've even annotated commercial unit C, which is the slightly L-shaped one in the middle of the image, storage unit C, as for commercial unit C, recognising that there is a reasonable likelihood that and that's a reasonable sized commercial unit as well, that they may want to break all the way through into that storage unit that is immediately contiguous with their rear boundary. Commercial unit A and B, the long, thin, narrow ones at the top of the image, equally they are relatively small commercial units between 70 and 100 square metres, they may well want to have those spaces as well. But equally, you could sublet and change that occupation. How you divide up commercial spaces and how many businesses you have within them is out with the control of planning.
Okay, all right. It's quite a complicated application. Let's make some progress. Any other comments, members? I'm sure the agent has heard very loudly and very clearly around concerns with communication and making sure that good neighbourly activity will take place going forward. And around the ecological, I think there's some social value. This is a drum I bang quite often. I think there's some social value to be added by developers with this scheme, working with neighbours. Anyway, right. Any more comments before we?
If we're onto the comment section, the only other comment would be, if we look at the current position on the high street, it's not a particularly attractive piece, and it would be an improvement on as part of a broader regeneration of the Fratton area, and there was reference to the improvements that are being made with the bridge centre. So that is it is outside of this particular application, but is, I think, relevant.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I shall move the officer's recommendation with the conditions that are attached. Councillor Smith has seconded. Is there anything else, members? Okay, those in favour, please indicate. Against? I think we're there.
There's 5 votes in favour with 1 against. The motion passes and planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Kieran. Okay, Twyford Avenue.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Waiting for your nod. Thank you, Chairman. This application is land at 305 to 307 Twyford Avenue, Portsmouth, and is for the construction of a 3-storey building to provide 6 flats and with 2 parking bays and landscaping following demolition of the existing buildings. It's before Planning Committee because it is a Portsmouth City Council scheme. There are no deputations on this one. There is an update in the SMAT regarding the 5-year housing land supply situation, again emphasising that this will provide 2 additional flats which will add usefully to the supply of housing in the city and seek to reduce, albeit slightly, the deficit on the 2.9 on the 5-year housing land supply, and the tilted balance therefore applies. There have also been amendments, draw your attention in the SMAT to the wording of condition 14. Doesn't change the recommendation, but condition 14 proposes obscure glass screens to the balconies, and a further condition is added to secure secondary east-facing living room window to be obscure glazed and non-opening. And that is listed as condition 24 on page 3 of the SMAT. Moving on to the presentation. So this is a corner plot at the junction of Twyford Avenue and Walker Road. Some 310 square metres in area, currently occupied by a 2-storey building formerly used as 4 flats. I've been advised that the existing building suffers from subsidence as a result of the street tree adjacent to the site, as shown in this slide here. Permission is, and it's also been deemed that the current building cannot be suitably renovated or repaired in the light of that subsidence issue. So the proposal is therefore to demolish the existing building and to construct a three-storey building to provide 6 flats, 6 one-bedroom flats, I should say. So just scrolling through the slides, and I will pause on each one to give you an idea of the design of the proposed building. So this is the proposed north elevation with the existing northern elevation shown in the inset. The building will be approximately 4 metres higher than the existing at eaves and 1 metre higher to the ridge. This is the proposed east Twyford Avenue facing elevation, existing shown in the inset, and the proposed below it. And then the south elevation shown there. And finally, the west elevation, showing its relationship to the adjacent properties. Moving on to the internal layout, if I just turn the pointer on, bear with me. So this is the roof plan showing solar panels set on the flat roof below the height of the parapet. To the right is the ground floor plan, 2 flats accessed off a communal hallway with storage area and with stairs up, with a stairwell up to the first floor, again with 2 flats, one facing Twyford Avenue and the corner shown by the curved wall and the other onto Walker Avenue, and then that's mirrored above on the second floor. This shows the site as a whole with the proposed landscaping to the rear and the 2 parking spaces as described in the application with access off Walker Avenue. And this slide shows the some CGI images of how it would look within the street scene. Noting that it's a 3-storey flat roof building adjacent to existing late Victorian, Edwardian terraced housing, whilst on its own maybe slightly out of character with the area, there are nevertheless, as shown on this slide, examples of buildings of similar architectural styles within the locality. By reference to this inset here, which is quite difficult to see, I think, certainly on my screen, the application site is up here, I believe. No, sorry, the application site is there. Let me get my pointer out. The application site is there. Building number 1 is, this one is almost directly opposite. Number 2 is further down Twyford Avenue here. Number 3 is down on the western side of Twyford Avenue. And 4 at the top there. And then finally number 5, so 4 at the top is this building here, and then 5 with the mansard roof is further south down here. This slide shows the impact on light to adjacent windows that would be arise as a result of this building. A sun and daylight assessment was carried out and no significant loss of light was found to occur. notwithstanding the increased height of the proposed building. And here's some photographs from upper floor rear bedroom windows of the adjacent property, and some views from neighbouring properties and from the local area of the site. View from the rear garden looking south, view from east from Walden Walker Road, the view along Twyford Avenue, bottom right, and the review from the garden looking west towards the application site looking west towards number 1 Walden Road. This shows some satellite images of the local area, with the application site highlighted by the red pinpoint. And then finally, a comparison of building footprints. So the red hatching is existing, and the blue hatching, if I just highlight that with my pointer. So the blue hatching, which I'm outlining here, is of the proposed building. So the material considerations are set out in the report, and the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed on pages 39 through to 46. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Edward. Members, questions? I mean, in your presentation, you said no significant loss of light for people listening. What does that mean in reality for people living next door?
Which the scheme has been assessed against, there will be no material loss of light to those neighbouring windows.
Because I think the wording "no significant" suggests some.
There will be some, yes,
but
it's not sufficient to warrant a refusal of planning permission on those grounds.
Thank you. It's useful to tease that out. Any other questions, members? I mean, it's not a particularly attractive design, is it? I think we've probably agreed with that. I think Councillor Candish was first, and then Judith.
I have a question first. Apologies if I missed it in the presentation, but we have solar on the roof. How are the houses being heated? Is it a central system? Is it individual gas boilers? Is it electric?
Don't have that information to hand, I'm afraid.
Okay. Second question was, before, the new design has 2 parking spaces kind of built into the design. Are they incremental to what is there at the moment? Or are they replacing something because we've lost some curbage or something like that?
They are replacing what is already there. So
there's no net loss?
No net loss, no.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just to clarify, that frontage, the Walker Road frontage, double yellow lines at the moment, and there's no on-site parking. So 4 flats, 0 parking currently, 6 flats, 2 parking spaces future. So no net gain would actually be the way around. So you have the same number of flats looking for parking in surrounding streets, i.e. 4.
Clear. Thank you.
Judith.
On to comments now, Chair. I'm disappointed in this application because I think that the City Council, that we as City Council do some very good schemes, and I was particularly impressed to see the scheme down in Old Portsmouth, restoring the old brewery. I thought it was really good. And it was controversial when we gave planning permission. I just can't like this building in that context. I think I would be happy to approve it if it had a mansard or similar treatment to the roof, as indeed the other big new buildings along Twyford Road do, because it just softens that top bit of the building. But I'm afraid I am not minded to approve this application and would like to propose that we refuse it on the grounds of loss of amenity, oversized upper story, I would need help with some sort of a reason. But it's a brutal building in a varied street, but one where other modern buildings have taken the opportunity to mitigate the impact of the top story by a more interesting design.
Councillor Smith.
I was going to follow that up. Really, I was going to say that when you've got to show us a slide taking us through 5 different design applications nearby to try and tell us that there's lots of difference. It tells you've got to try and warm us up to try and make a decision. I just think it's too monolithic for me. And I put exactly that. The upper floor, could it be softened? Is what I actually wrote. Maybe a mansard roof or a lightening of the brick. I understand why it's red brick, because the whole area is a red brick sort of area. But it just could be, if it could be softened at the top from an architecture point of view. I just don't think it just sits very heavy on the site, really.
Are you seconding? Yeah. I mean, can we have a look at that, the slide with the comparators again? All right.
Wrongs don't make a right, Chair, but there is some mitigation in some of those buildings that are on the lines of what I think should have been done.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we have a motion in front of us. Any other comments? Well, it's the only motion we have to consider at this moment in time. We need some wording, though. Kieran, have you got something you can use?
Well, I'd defer to the planning officers to see if they've taken that into something that they would be happy with putting on a refusal notice.
Okay, well, people think
Chair,
about the wording.
We're having a slight conversation amongst ourselves, which it's very wrong of us. We should be doing this through your good self.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Okay. I was going to ask, let me ask a question and take it on me. The options we have are essentially to approve, to reject, or to defer. I think that the general direction of it is very good, but I also share my colleagues' concerns over sort of the aesthetics of it. And I want to understand what the consequences will be if we reject it. How long... I'm struggling to find the right question to ask in a way that can be answered.
Yeah, to anticipate the question and thus give it an answer. Your job, as I've said many times before, is to determine the application before you. Where there is an obvious, well, go and change that bit, we can often do that by planning condition and grant it, or indeed very, very occasionally we have deferred items. Here, it would be a fundamental redesign, a different roof form. I'm not sure a mansard roof is appropriate for this site, for example, because it's contiguous with a hip roof. You might need to do something different altogether, and that might impact internal floor spaces, etc. So the applicant would need an opportunity to fully revisit the application. Would it take longer to fully revisit the application by resubmitting an application with new plans, or resubmitting every drawing again and starting again? Well, half a dozen, 1/6 of the other, really. There, I'm very mindful this is a city council application, and thus we do not wish to see unreasonable expenditure of public money. But I also wish to maintain the integrity of this planning committee and the local planning authority. If this was an unacceptably designed private development, you would refuse it rather than allow it to be deferred. I would suggest, and indeed I've seen that at this committee, because of the strong emphasis on quality of design this committee has upheld. So while you could defer it to allow them to fundamentally redesign, that is in your gift. I'm not going to say don't do that, because it would probably be cheaper for the city council. Is that fair and reasonable when compared to others that apply for planning permission for designs that you find unacceptable, would be the question I would put you on the other side of that.
Okay, thank you. That was actually helped me out of my bind. I'm clear about what I'm going to do now. Thank you.
Thank you. And a reminder to members, questions and comments are through the chair. Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Anything else? We haven't got the wording. Yeah, you wanted a few minutes for the wording? Yeah. Okay, we'll take a few minutes to put some wording together. We'll go offline for a few minutes in case people want to stretch their legs.